Let's talk about some more NBA draft prospects. We're talking about Colin Murray Boyles, Maxime Reynaud, and more. Michael Bolton?
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and we're going to be rebranding this channel to Locked On Maya Lesnar for 1 week coming up. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms. So we're talking more draft prospects today, getting into 5 different guys in the show. We're talking about, like I said, Colin Murray Boyles and Maxime Reynaud. We are getting into Cam Jones, Neoclis Abdallas, and Isaiah Evans as the final one, where we might as well just get straight into it right now. It is, what day is it today? It is World Turtle Day. World Turtle Day. So shout out to Jerry Ferrara and those other animals, I guess, not quite as important. I mean, we were going to talk about Isaiah Evans, but I realized we're not, because that was an old sheet I was reading off, because Isaiah Evans has decided to go back into college. He's not going to be here for the NBA draft, so we're not going to talk about Isaiah Evans, so scratch that one. All right, so here he is. He's back on the show once again. It is the host of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. You've seen his NBA Big Board Substack, which is a great newsletter to be subscribing to. Rafael Barlow is back on the show. Raf, it's good to have you back.
It's good to be back, man. It seems like it's been a couple years, but I'm glad to be here to talk draft.
It has been a couple of years, and you've been so active out in the draft space right now, of course, writing all the stuff up on your Substack, putting it all out for Locked On NBA Big Board, and I see all these interviews that you're putting out one-on-one at Combine and other events, talking to these players, and you always find these guys who are maybe not as highly scouted by other people, a lot of European players that don't always pop up to the top of the radar. We're going to talk about one of those guys later on in the show, and you're very bold with some of your takes on some of these players, which is exactly what you want. We want someone that's just being authentic and giving those opinions on these guys. So, let's just bring it straight in now. We'll start straight off by talking about a guy who you think might be a little bit overrated by some other draft people, prospects, evaluators, however you want to phrase it. And we're going to go to South Carolina. I want to talk about Colin Murray Boyles, who, if I was to sum it up as a person who is not as in-depth into this, Raf, I would say he's like an undersized defensive forward who plays center, but is he big enough? And the idea is always, Draymond Green. But where's the offense and where's the shooting? Is that like a representation, broad strokes of what Murray Boyles sort of is?
Yeah, I mean, the word overrated is kind of strong.
I'm
probably more comfortable saying I'm a little bit lower on him than the consensus. And you just kind of pointed out the reasons. I mean, Draymond Green is a 1 of 1. Like, it's tough to find a Draymond Green comparison. And so it's kind of like, I mean, this may be a bad example, but I remember at one point teams were looking for the next Dirk, right? And then you had guys that got drafted pretty high because they were European and they were tall and they could shoot. But there's only one Dirk, right? And so I think with Draymond, it's definitely difficult to find someone that is similar to him, because you got to have the body type, but just the IQ. And then there's things like Draymond has that are just like these intangibles, these leadership intangibles, even though, I think it's fair if you think he's a terrible leader in a sense, because he is a little hands-on from time to time. But Draymond has so many different ways that he's able to impact the game, even if he scores 6 points and has 6 rebounds and 4 assists. So that's why I think it's hard to compare. I think with Boyles, I love him on the college level. I think on the college level, he's just an absolute mismatch. I mean, he's too big for smaller guys. And then if you put a bigger guy on him, he has enough face-up game and enough handle to get to his spots on the floor. I mean, there's a game against Johni Broome where he just absolutely dominated him for a half. I just don't know how it scales up to the NBA. because on one hand, I don't want to just always put guys in boxes as 3 and D, vertical lob threat, stretch four, and so on. But he's a guy that just doesn't fit neatly into a box. He measured at what, like 6'6", doesn't space the floor. I think he made just 14 jump shots all season. So he's kind of tricky to not necessarily build around, but just tricky to have lineups that fit around his skill set. So you probably need to have like a stretch five, which means you probably need to have a stretch five that can protect the rim and space the floor, where those guys are hard to find. So I think he's just a difficult guy to evaluate for me, one of the hardest guys all year.
Yeah, look, I think one of those things you said in there about like you love him at a college level, or he's just better than everybody else. He's able to be stronger and more aware and in position better than these guys and cook them. But you get to the NBA and it's obviously a very different sort of a scenario where you're right. Like people fall into these traps, and I'm sure you've been guilty of it, and I've been guilty of it as well. As you throw out these one of one type stories, these development. Oh, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Yeah, cool. That happens once. Like happens with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Kawhi Leonard becoming an unbelievable shooter when he couldn't shoot at all, and turning into this all defensive guy who's a 40% 3-point shooter. Like, okay, that's cool, but that's happened once. And yeah, Draymond Green, it's happened once. And trying to put these guys in that spot. Now, people would argue that someone like this, where you go, he's tough to evaluate, he's tough to put in a box. That's great. You want the outlier type players, but often these sort of guys who have this domination at college and put up these numbers, like his defensive numbers are really strong. Obviously, the shooting's not good, but like I know these aren't the same players, but an undersized center who put up great numbers in college a couple of years ago, Trayce Jackson-Davis, right? He did all these things and go, look how good he is. He's killing these guys. These numbers are fantastic. He's a little bit undersized as center, but I don't know if he should. And like now he's barely played this season. He slipped all the way to the end of the second round. Again, I'm not saying they're the same players, but you've heard similar arguments about him coming out of the draft. And even a guy that I talked about on my show yesterday, I think it was, like I don't remember who it was, but maybe it was Ace Senor, I want to say, for example, just a guy with, look at his defensive numbers. Yeah, okay, but does it make sense when you get into the NBA? Is there anything you see with Murray Boyles? With the shooting, like 71 from the line is not bad. Like, can he be reliable? Can he be respected, I guess, as a shooter?
It's going to take a while. I mean, I was at the combine and he didn't look like he was a good shooter. I think for him, it's just a tricky evaluation. And I love the fact that you brought up Trayce Jackson-Davis. And Jackson-Davis right now, the Golden State Warriors list him at 6'9".
Okay.
And he's undersized. And Murray Boyles is 6'6". In shoes, he might be 6'8" at best. And so, and then even then, like you look at what Trayce Jackson did in college, he was dominant. Like, I mean, his numbers were incredible, like his last 2 years or so. So I don't even know if that is a good comparison. I'm just looking at the numbers. Trayce Jackson-Davis was 20 and 11 and 4 assists per game his last year at Indiana. Kyler Murray Boyles, like I said, he's just difficult for me. Another thing that I feel like hasn't been talked about enough, and I don't want this to seem like just an episode I'm bashing him, is I've never seen a guy play on a team that was as bad as Murray Boyles, and it's never mentioned. Like, we've seen guys where they say, even like Anthony Edwards was the number one pick. I don't know if he's a winner. I mean, his team didn't win. You talk about with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, well, their team was 15 and 17. Well, South Carolina was even worse than that. And it's not mentioned. So I just think, like, for the guys that are like all into the analytics and they find that there's things that support why you can be high on Murray Boyles, but I just feel like there's some things that just have not been mentioned because he's kind of like the analytics darling, or one of the analytics darlings of this class, despite the fact that he doesn't shoot.
Yeah, like that becomes interesting because there is that, like, analytics is a broad term that can be put into many different ways. You go, well, look at the defensive numbers and look at this, but there are things that's like, okay, but analytics also be like, well, you're not shooting, and so how are you creating space, and do you need to be on a team where you're the number 5 offensive option, and do you play as a reserve, and then how does that work if there's not other usage guys who are efficient in that group? And that's that sort of problem with these guys is, like, again, we can go back to Draymond. Draymond works because he starts and he plays with these elite other offensive options, but if Draymond was a bench player playing 23 minutes a night, his offensive limitations will be much more of a problem. You'd have to create all these weird staggers to get the right guys on the floor with him at the right time, because it doesn't work otherwise if he's not surrounded by the correct players and they haven't built it the right way. And so many of these guys have failed in that type of scenario. So to me, like well, let's say I've seen him, Murray Boyles, be projected as high as 5 or 6 in drafts. Do you have him as a lottery guy, like outside top 10? Well, what sort of player do you think, or range do you think he should be in?
I don't think he's a lottery guy, but I could see him going high in the lottery. But he's also a guy that I wonder, how does it look for him in workouts? Like, it has to be like the 3-on-3 type workouts where he's going to shine. I think if you put him in like 1-on-none shooting drills, I don't know if you're going to be too impressed with that. But he does have a good body of work or a good resume on the floor in games, other than the fact that South Carolina was like 12-20 this year. So I get why some teams are high on him. But for me, I just there's two things that work against him, is that he's undersized and he doesn't space the floor. And I just don't know the best fit for him. And even with Draymond, I think with Draymond's like intangibles as a leader and a guy that pushes people, I've actually seen it with my own eyes. I mean, I've seen Draymond play pickup basketball with 4 non-NBA guys, and they beat a team of 5 NBA players because Draymond pointed out where everybody was at. He pointed out everybody's weakness. He worked the refs to make sure that his player got a foul call on the next end when he barely got touched. There's so many little things that Draymond does that do not show up in the stat sheet. And Murray Boyles could get to that level, but I just don't know.
Well, we're going to talk about some other players, including one that you're higher on than the consensus, Raf, in a sec. But first of all, today's episode, it is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night there are highlight-worthy performances. There are major momentum shifts. There are can't-miss moments. We're in the conference finals. So whatever it is that you're looking for, FanDuel is going to have you covered. It's easy to stay in the game with FanDuel before tip-off and live during the game. With player props and performance trends, they've got the same game parlays as well. There are more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. So with the Eastern Conference Finals starting, or actually we're recording this before they've started, but it's coming out after it started, so you would have seen what happened in game 1. Maybe you got some live bets in and combine those into that same game parlay. But also, if you're a new customer, you can get a $200 bonus bet if you hit that first $5 bet. So place your first $5 bet and see if it wins, and then $200 of bonus bets can land in your account. If you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. So head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay, Raf, let's get back in now. Like we said, a player that you're higher on than others at this stage. We're talking about the upperclassman, big man from Stanford. I was going to have this. I was going to talk about this guy on another one of my shows, but I had a feeling that you'd come through and tell me that he was a guy that you were higher on, because I've seen your Locked On NBA big board list to see where Maxime Reynaud sits, and it's quite high. Reynaud is a 7-footer from Stanford. He's 21 years of age. What's the quick encapsulation of what he can bring to an NBA team?
Simple. He's a 7-footer, has positional size. He averaged 20 points and 11 rebounds, give or take a few decimal points. And he made the most three-pointers, or the second most three-pointers ever made in the history of college basketball by a 7-footer. So when you factor in that this guy was second in the ACC in scoring, first in rebounds, positional size, made over 35% of his threes, and had a historic season from deep as a 7-footer, why is he not a lock as a first-round pick? So some people may point out that he didn't necessarily block a lot of shots. And so I spoke with him, and he mentioned that there were some changes that he made over the last 10 games of the season, and he averaged 2.7 blocks per game. Some say, well, I don't know if he can defend in space. Well, if you watch his film, you see that this guy is a very good athlete. He moves better than most 7-footers. There's not too many 7-footers that can attack closeouts, Euro step around guys, go coast to coast. And another interesting stat that he mentioned to me was he averaged 21 points per game and only caught like 2 lobs all season. So imagine him in a situation to where he has someone, an NBA level playmaker that is setting him up. I think he's a good enough guy to where he can be a lob threat. Not necessarily, I don't expect him to be like Jackson Hayes or anything like that, but I do think that he is a good enough athlete where he can be a lob threat. He can score on the post, left hand, right hand, fade away, put the ball on the floor. I mean, he's so talented. And then I look at the trajectory. He started off his career barely having a scholarship at Stanford. He averaged 4.5 points per game his freshman year. And then as a senior, I don't think anybody saw when he first got on campus, saw him as a guy that would have a historic season in the ACC, which is one of the most, the best conferences in college basketball. And then they have a deep history. So I'm all in on Reynaud, and I think he's a first round lock.
Interesting that you say that he's a lock, because again, a lot of people have him in the second round. I've seen him have him quite high. Now, for example, like we had a 7-foot rookie this last season that was one of the more high volume 3-point shooting rookies at 7 foot of all time in Quinton Post. How does Post's game differ from Reynaud? As a shooter, is Reynaud a more reliable shooter? Do you think it's more translatable to the NBA? How do you think that sort of comparison, just in terms of shooting 7-footers, works?
I mean, if they're similar, but Reynaud has more work on the block and he can put the ball on the floor and is a better transition finisher and a lob threat, that's a win. I mean, I've been shocked that he hasn't been mocked as a first rounder. He leaves the combine, plays one game, and all of a sudden everybody is starting to mock him as a first rounder. And to me, your draft stock shouldn't go from a second rounder to a first rounder based off of one performance at the NBA combine as opposed to 30 in a season. To me, that means you just haven't been watching him play.
Why do you think that is a thing that happens? Because it clearly is, that people, they'll either put outweighted stock on tournament play, like 2 games in a tournament, or they're like, oh, look at this, he shot 35 of 50 on his open 3-pointers at the combine. Is it because that's the most recent thing? Is it because they're there and they go, I don't want to rely upon something else that I saw 6 months ago and this is the most recent thing? Okay, how is it just people convincing themselves of other arguments? Why do you think that is such a prevalent thing that gets teams into trouble?
I mean, there's a couple of reasons I can think of. Like, I use Cedric Coward, for example. I've had him as a first rounder all year.
Yep.
And so it was even before he played just 6 games. And so I think for people to see him as a first rounder based off of what he did at the combine, which he only shot the ball, and then his measurements, to me, that means you've based a lot of your decision based off of one day of work as opposed to what he did at Eastern Washington last year and the 6 games he played this year. So I also feel like it's a lot of it is follow the leader. If the most powerful platform has a guy number 10, then people are going to start putting him anywhere from 8 to 14. And so I think that it's just a thing where you just can't be afraid to be wrong. And if you feel it, you trust your gut. You just got to trust your gut instincts. And that's why I've trusted it with Reynaud all year long. And when he had a good performance at the combine, I wasn't shocked. But I am kind of shocked to see everybody starting to move him up now.
You referenced earlier that he said something about a change in his defensive approach to generate more of those blocks. His final 2 games of the season in the NIT, he had 4 blocks and 5 blocks in those games. Have you seen what that difference was? Have you gone back and had a look? Do you see what the difference was? And how does that then translate across to the NBA? If it's a noticeable difference, is it something that will work more in an NBA level, or is it just something that was able to be changed and generate those numbers at a college level?
Well, I think for sure he's going to apply some of the changes that he made. He had mentioned to me that early in his career at Stanford, he was just kind of taught to wall up. When guys come to the basket, create a wall, not necessarily get blocks. And then he talked about just overall like positioning. And he mentioned it was 10 games, I think it was like 10 games he had mentioned. And so I know over the last 7 games, it was 2.7 blocks per game. And then at the combine, I don't remember how many blocks he had, but he did show that he could defend in space. So I think for him defensively, he's going to be fine. The concern that I had for him coming into the season was, it's like, man, for a guy that's so tall and such a good athlete and such a good rebounder, he's not much of a rim protector. And then I feel like he addressed that concern a little bit this year. 10-game sample size is not like a big pie to choose from, but I feel like it's enough to show that he can protect the rim.
We're going to come back and talk about two more guys. We'll come back and do it right now. This is a guy that, I first was brought to my attention by taking a look through, again, your NBA Big Board Substack, Raf. A guy that, again, there are many people who just will not have heard really anything about Nioclas Avdalas. So let's talk about Nioclas Avdalas, who just comes across as European 6'7" point forward who maybe can shoot and has defensive question marks, I guess. Like that, if he looks on the surface of like, he's a 19-year-old European guy who played limited minutes, but maybe he passes and he can sort of defend and the shooting could be there. And like, I feel like every single player that seems to come across, how does he separate from that sort of an idea?
Well, number one, he is a really good athlete. So I've been on record of saying that if he went to college or had a better situation, we would be talking about him like we're talking about Yegor Demin, Kasparas Giacochonis, Nolan Traore, and all those guys. He's been just as good as those guys throughout his career in Europe. Now, last summer, I will say, I think it was the FIBA 18s, he did not have his best performance there, while a guy like Ben Saraf averaged like 28 points a game. But I was at the Basketball Without Borders in Indianapolis in 2024 All-Star Weekend, and he was there. Giacochonis was there. Yegor Demin wasn't there, but Nolan Traore was there. Ben Saraf was there, and he more than held his own. If you didn't know the guys and you just saw the names, just watched them play, you would not have come away from that particular weekend thinking that there was a major gap, 20, 30, 40 spot differential between those two guys. But between all of those guys, I'm sorry. But I think it just all boils down to opportunity. Ben Saraf goes to Radio Farm in Germany. That team is probably like the only high-level team in Europe that is not afraid to play multiple, even to play young guys major minutes. I mean, they're doing it with Noah Senge and Ben Saraf this year. A few years ago it was Killian Hayes. Last year it was Juan Nunez. Most European teams are not going to trust young guys to play major minutes. We've seen that with Hugo Gonzalez, who's a projected first-round pick, but is barely playing. Giacochonis goes to Illinois, plays with the ball in his hands. Yegor Demin goes to BYU, has an opportunity to play with the ball in his hands. Nolan Traore is the starting point guard for his team in France. Avdalas, again, to me, the talent level is not that far between them. You can make a case and say he's just as big, if not bigger than everyone other than Demin, and he's a better athlete than everyone other than Asenge. So by him not having the opportunity to play, I feel like he's been held back and restricted. He played in the EuroLeague when he was 15 years old. Yeah. So you know how good you have to be to play in the EuroLeague at 15. And to me, just watching him and knowing him a little bit, his game is more suited to the free-flowing structure of, or lack of structure, you may say, of NBA basketball, as opposed to just the tactical, very structured where you can't really color out the lines of Europe and even Greece. And so for him, whenever he's been in the States, he's played well. He played well at the Combine this year. Did not have a lot of on-ball reps, but he shot the ball well. And with his size, his athleticism, his ability to shoot the ball, and his passing, I think he's a first-round talent. And I think he could get to that range. I've had some teams call me and ask me about him, but the colleges are heavy on him right now.
He's very young. Like, he's not quite... He's just turned 19 like a couple of months ago, so he's very young. You mentioned the history playing in EuroLeague at that age. What do you make of the level of competition playing for Peristeri? This season he's on loan from Panathinaikos, I believe. So he's sort of been around the last couple of seasons. What's that level of competition like? You said talk about playing those minutes. He averaged almost 19 minutes a game. Like, with the Greek league and the level of Peristeri in general, like, what's that competition like?
Well, he's playing in first division. I mean, Greece is interesting because you have these two teams, Panathinaikos and Olympiakos, that are, you just can pencil them in, not even pencil, you can write it in permanent marker, that they are going to be in the finals every year. I want to say only one time since 1985, one time since 1985 that a team other than those two teams won a championship. So for him, he did not necessarily have the opportunity or the minutes at Panathinaikos, so they put him on loan, but he is playing in Greece's first division. And I thought he played well with the minutes that he got, but also feel like he's somewhat being limited and he's being held back. But it is a decent league. I would say if I rate the domestic leagues in Europe, I think Spain's ACB is number one. Then it would be between Turkey or France or Greece as the next best domestic leagues.
He's an interesting sort of player. Like, it's these sort of players always get me intrigued. I go, oh, look how big he is. He's 6'8". He is athletic. He is, got an ability to pass. He got an ability to shoot. We have seen quite a few of these guys though be absolutely useless. Like Mario Hezonja, one of those guys who kind of goes, oh, he's super athletic and he can pass and he can shoot, and then he did nothing. There's obviously been successes as well. I want to talk about a guy that has, especially recently, turned into more of a success. And I'm not saying that these guys are necessarily the same player, but for me, as a guy that's just sort of talking about Avdalas now and looking at him, and I go physical similarities, I go, okay, Deni Avdija has a similar sort of size profile, passing ability, that sort of a look. Now, how would you compare and contrast those two players?
Well, if you look at Avdija's situation, if you go back to, I think it was a 2020, I thought Avdija was a point forward.
Yep.
And one of the issues Avdija had was he was not a good shooter.
Yep.
I remember talking to people around him, and they said, I knew we were in trouble when Washington drafted him when they could not pronounce his name correctly on draft night. And this is coming from somebody that's pretty close to him. And the person also mentioned, well, when they didn't know how to pronounce his name on draft night, we knew they did not know how he played, or maybe they had not done their research. So what happens? He goes to Washington and he stands in the corner. That's not the place to put a guy who is not a good shooter. I understand why they may have felt like, we don't know if he's good enough to get on ball reps. I think John Wall was on the team at the time and Bradley Beal was on the team. So I get it. Goes to Portland, totally different situation, and now he's going to get paid. He's going to look like, he looks like the lottery pick that Washington thought he would be. So it was very situational. I think between the two, I think that Avdalas is the better defender, which I do feel like because of the role that he played in Washington where he didn't get on-ball reps, he had to become a better defender in order to get minutes on the court. And now you're kind of seeing everything put together in Portland. But Avdalas is younger than what Avdija was when Avdija really broke out. Avdija broke out at the U20s, I believe. And Avdalas just played at the U18s. He's not even 20 years old. So I think that Avdalas, at the minimum, could have a similar trajectory or similar path as the Portland Trailblazers version of Deni Avdija. But if he goes to a situation where he doesn't have on-ball reps and he's what we call a corner boy, where you just kind of stand in a corner, I do think that he's a better shooter at the same stage, to where that he can knock down enough shots to where it may open up some things for him to have some on-ball responsibilities. But he's all in on believing that he is a point guard. I just talked to him yesterday. He said, I am not a wing. I am a point guard.
That is very interesting, because there's quite a few of these taller point guards, as there are every draft in this class as well. So interesting to see how that develops. So let's go from a young European point guard to an older American guard in Cam Jones from Marquette, who is 23 years of age. Cam, he's probably getting mocked most of the time at the maybe back end first round, but likely in the second round. We don't have to spend a huge amount of time on Cam, but like we're talking about a 29 usage guard for Marquette, played 34 minutes a game. He averaged 20 points, over 6 assists per 36 minutes. Is this one of those cases, Raf, of just a guy being older and beating up on younger opponents?
No, because last year as a junior, he was Marquette's leading scorer. And this was a team that had two guys drafted in Oso Ighodaro and Tyler Kolek. This year, what has me so intrigued about him is that he had to play point guard. He had more on-ball responsibilities. And I don't think anyone saw him as a guy that was going to average 6 assists a game and take care of the ball. Now, with the added responsibilities, the shooting suffered, at least from downtown, but he has shown in the past that he is a capable shooter. I think for him, he's a guy that is plug and play. I think he's ready. I think he can come in and play both guard spots, and he takes care of the ball, and he does have a lot of experience under his belt. So I think he can come in and help a team, especially like a playoff team that is looking for some low salaried guys that can provide some depth.
The interesting thing to me about that is those assist numbers, because you look at what he did the year before, where he averaged 2.4 assists in 29 minutes, and to be able to like over double that assist rate because of a change of role. I love players who are adaptable, because let's be fair, someone like Cam Jones isn't going to waltz onto an NBA team and go, all right, here I am, I'm in charge, I'm a 29 usage guard, let's just build around me. It's not going to happen, right? He's got to be able to move his game to be, okay, am I low usage? Am I 10 minutes off the bench? Am I 15 minutes here? Am I handling the ball? Or whatever I'm doing, I need to be able to adjust. And that ability to me, and usually I'm like very much, okay, if you were this good of a prospect, surely you would have done it at 18, 19, 20, not at 23. But like that ability to be able to adjust what you do to change part of your game to what is needed is a real key part, I believe, of these back-end guys, these lower drafted players being able to stick and have success, is realizing what your limitations are, realizing what the path to success is. So to me, it's a real eye-opener. What about him, like, and the shooting? Because that's clearly an issue here. Like, he shot 31%, but his previous 3 seasons, 41, 36, and 39. Is that largely due to the fact that he was playing more on ball, playing more as a point guard, taking more of those tougher shots, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Because if you think about the Marquette team last year, if they ran a Tyler Kolek, Oso Ighodaro pick and roll, he was probably open in the corner. This year, he got the grenades, the bombs, the end of the shot clock possessions where he had to force something up. He didn't have anyone setting him up for those wide open corner threes. So I think that is a big reason why there was a dip in the efficiency from three. But I think if you put him in a role where he's off the ball some, or if he's playing with another playmaker that can get him those open catch and shoot opportunities, I have a lot of faith in him being able to knock them down. So I would be more concerned if it were the other way around, where if he just had one outlier season from three, and then he had other seasons where he was inefficient. And so I just look at this as a situation where the 3-point numbers dropped because he had to take more difficult shots. And you figure in the NBA, he's not going to have that type of usage. He's going to have more opportunities to play off the catch, and he should be able to knock him down.
That brings me to the next part of the game that he might need to adjust or to do in terms of being an NBA player is defensively. Like, he averaged 1.5 steals per 36, which is a pretty good number. It's not absolutely elite. Can he be a guy his size is fine. He's not gigantic by any means, but like, is he going to be able to be someone who can be a passing lane guy, a guy that can hold his own defensively? He's not going to be a defensive sieve out there. Can he turn himself from? I'm going to use this name a lot through a lot of these draft shows, but someone like Aaron Nesmith. Obviously, he was drafted higher, end of the lottery, but he came in as a 40% three-point shooter, and now he's just like, okay, now I'm just a tenacious on-ball defender who just is in everyone's face every single play. And that wasn't what he did coming out of college. Like, I'm not saying that Jones needs to do that, but that was that switch in the game. But does he have the ability to change defensive or change his defensive approach and actually be a average to positive contributor on that end?
Yeah, I think that's between the ears. I think if he sets his mind to, I'm going to be a really good defender or a lockdown defender or a guy that teams can count on the defensive end, I think it's just up to him accepting that role. Like I mentioned with Avdia didn't come in with the reputation as a defender, but when he was not getting the reps on ball, he knew that, all right, I better defend my butt off if I'm going to see action on the floor, get another contract. And so with Cam Jones, I think with a lower usage rate, I think he'll be a better shooter, but I think he can put more effort on the defensive end because he was Marquette's. I mean, he was their engine. He was everything this year. So he couldn't afford to get in foul trouble. But like I said, I just think it's up to him mentally deciding that I'm going to have to lock in, or if this is what I need to do to get on the floor, then he'll do it.
Well, Raf, that will also just do it for us. So I appreciate you coming on and chatting with me and talking about all of these prospects of Dallas, Cam Jones. We talked about Colin Murray-Boyles, and we talked about Maxime Reynaud. So I know I've seen a lot of one-on-one interviews you've been doing over at Locked On NBA Big Board. What have you got cranking out over there and at the newsletter as well?
A lot, man. Time is super busy right now. Like, I don't even have enough time to sometimes think as I'm trying to juggle between writing and doing my podcast 5 days a week and then like guest appearances. But I have articles that I've written on the Locked On NBA, on the NBA Big Board newsletter. I just wrote an article today covering Neoclis Abdallas and some of the international prospects that have that could have a real impact not only on the NBA draft, but how it kind of trickles down to college basketball. as there's some college teams that are waiting on Neoclis Avdalas to decide what he's going to do and so on. So that's on NBABigBoard.com, the newsletter. And then there's the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast 5 days a week. I'm trying to get to your level where I can do 2 or 3 episodes in a day, but I'm here for you 5 days a week covering the NBA draft.
Well, we appreciate you making the time out of your busy schedule. We have to come on here and talk about some of these prospects to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball audience. Go check out all of Raf's stuff. Raf, thanks again for coming on.
Yep, anytime. You want to do it again, let me know.
It's always awesome having Raf on the show. It was great to have him back on. And he always has these under-the-radar sort of European guys. Now, Avdalas, he's a really interesting prospect. He may not end up staying in the draft. He might be in college. But often we get these guys, we get this early look at them. They go to college, they go back to Europe, and they come out the year after. So he's just a name to watch. And from the research I'm doing on Avdalas at the moment, I'm very intrigued. So just keep an eye on that. Shout out to all the Greek basketball fans that are out there. If you're a basketball fan, though, you should be subscribing to this show and checking out everything that we have got coming. There is another show on draft prospects coming tomorrow, and I'm going to tell you right now who is on that show in terms of prospects. We're looking at old mate Con Knipple, the big fella, I don't even know what to call him. Let's call him VJ Edgecombe because that's what he is. Walter Clayton Jr. coming up, as well as Chaz Lanier. Get ready for that one, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.